Welcome back. News and Talk 1380 WAOK, the voice of the community, calling 447-226-1380. Get you involved in the conversation. We're still talking from the African People's Socialist Party to Dr. Omali Yeshitela about the American government's attacks on his organization because of their advocacy for reparations for the African American community. Dr. Yeshitela, I want to talk both about the government's raiding of your home in St. Louis as well as the raids they've had in Sarasota, Florida, and kind of the history of the federal government attacking the African People's Socialist Party.
Yeah, I think that's really important, but I think that we have to be careful in not to try and draw an analogy between our party and what is characterized as Black nationalist movement and groups like the Proud Boys and other so-called racist organizations in this country in terms of how the federal government treats each of us. The fact is that the federal government is the source of the attack on us and Black people, has been for a very long time. And, you know, we mentioned people like King and Malcolm X and Panthers, et cetera, who came under assault by the federal government. This is Black people. Even though I am in the crosshair immediately, the African People's Socialist Party, Uhuru movement, immediately in the crosshairs, but it's Black people who are being attacked. And so, but the Proud Boys also attack Black people and also attack the freedom of people who are trying to get out from under the thumb of the United States government. So they work hand in hand, hand in glove when it comes to dealing with Africans and other people who are colonized. They have contradictions from time to time with the federal government, but the strategic aim of both of them happens to be the same. In terms of what happened with our party, is on July 29th at 5 o'clock in the morning, a pre-dawn raid occurred here in St. Louis, where I'm currently located. My wife and I were up prepared for the day. She has the responsibility of some 50-some-odd economic development institutions that we have initiated, many of them in St. Louis, where we created what's called the Black Power Blueprint, and we've acquired something like 20-some-odd properties and instituted various kinds of economic development and cultural programs here. So we were up talking about various things, but one of which was my wife had to owner Zene Yeshitela had to get to our headquarters, the Uhuru House here in St. Louis, in North St. Louis, which is predominantly African community, to preside over a school, a training that was happening for Black women who were training to become doulas, to affect healthy birth outcomes for African women and African babies in a city that sees something like enough African babies dying the first year of life to fill 15 kindergarten classes. And so we're sitting there, and out of the dark comes this booming noise, first that we didn't understand what it was initially, and then it became clear they were commanding us to come out of the house with our hands up, that this is the FBI. And then explosions started going off all around the house and in the close proximity within the neighborhood. And I asked my wife to wait and call people and let them know we were under attack while I went downstairs. Well, what happened was she couldn't call because they had jammed our phones. I got downstairs and confronted these military forces standing in front of armored vehicle with assault weapons, and the assault weapons had mounted on them these laser targeting devices with these red dots bouncing off my chest. And of course, what comes to my mind is the murder of Fred Hampton, assisted by the FBI on December 4th, 1969. So I was almost sure they were going to kill me at that moment. I made it downstairs. My wife follows me, and as she's coming out of the door, she's almost hit in the face by a drone that they've sent upstairs. They force me to put my hands behind my back. They zip tie me. They take my cell phone. My wife comes down. They handcuff her behind her back. They politely said if we wanted to, we could sit on the curb while they went through this. They went upstairs into the house. They stayed there for hours, and while they were in there, they took cell phones and they took laptops and they took iPads and any kind of recording devices, And at the same time, though we didn't know it at the moment, they were raiding an office of our Solidarity Front of our party in the mostly white section of St. Louis, and they used battering rams there, as they had used at my house in terms of knocking into doors and windows. They knocked down doors. They used flashbang grenades. They went in and went upstairs in an apartment above the actual office there, and handcuffed the occupants, a white man, and a young white man and his wife there, held them. The young man was Jesse Neville, who became one of the unindicted at that time co-defendants in this struggle. They went across town with another section of the white community and knocked down the doors and went into the home of another Solidarity member who became a co-defendant, Penny Hess, and her roommate. They handcuffed them, held them at gunpoint, similar as they had done with us. And then at the same time, they went to our office headquarters in St. Petersburg, Florida, knocked down doors, occupied the place, took our radio station off the air for a moment of time, went and raided our archives with 50 years or so of archived materials and the history of our party and our struggle in general. Went to my home in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I'm from, but don't live there right now. They stayed in there for hours. I'm talking about scores of FBI agents. I'm not talking about suit-wearing, guys with crew cut haircuts. They may have had crew cuts, but they were military forces in all of the places that I've just described. And while I'm talking to them, asking them what is going on in front of my house in St. Louis, they tell me that there's a Russian later that day. There's going to be an indictment of a Russian. And when that indictment comes down later that day, it's going to have my name on it as somebody who was involved, and they're serving a search warrant. Though they don't say for what or anything, they're just robbing materials. And so they didn't charge us with anything. Eventually, I was able to leave the scene, although, as I mentioned, in some cases, they spent 6 or 7 hours in our buildings. They attacked something like 7 different structures in the 2 states, St. Petersburg, Florida, and St. Louis, Missouri. So it was a massive attack that they made on us, and we went for 9 months of being characterized as unindicted co-conspirators. Which meant that we had no legal standing in the court. That it's not like we could now go to the court and say, hey, stop these guys from doing this, explain this, because they hadn't been charged with anything. In fact, they didn't even release our names in the newspaper. They shut down an entire community, both in St. Petersburg and St. Louis, African community. And the newspapers were writing articles with the presumption that we were the ones that they were targeting and what have you. So it was a terrible disadvantage that we were suffering from. First, the attack overall, then secondly, that the attack would occur and we weren't able to respond in a courtroom or anything like that to the attacks. Later, so that happened, and then for 9 months we went by before we were even indicted. And when we were indicted, I had to go into Tampa, Florida, for this indictment to the court there. I go into Tampa, Florida, appear before a judge. Penny Hess was there at the same time. This was in May of the following year, and then Jesse Neville would come the next week. They handcuffed mugshot, fingerprinted me, Penny Hess. They put us in leg irons. They put me in chains, leg irons, and what have you. Held me locked up in a cell for an hour or more before being brought down in chains before a judge who was very kind, I'm understanding, that gave me a very lenient bail of a $25,000 signature bond, conditions that I had to turn in my passport. There could be no weapons in my house. I had to make a report every week to some kind of officer of the court, and I have to get permission to travel any place that I'm going. Now, those are the circumstances, and then and then later on, of course, we were able to get some extraordinarily good lawyers. We filed a motion to the court to dismiss the charges, that they were frivolous, that they were a major assault on First Amendment rights, And then, having done that, we asked for oral arguments. There were oral arguments happened. We were back in Tampa, Florida, in the court. They went 4 months without even responding to the motion that we made to dismiss the charges. In the fourth month, the court, not the actual court, but there was a determination by this entity. I've forgotten exactly what it's called now. It's not the court. That's the magistrate court. The magistrate determined that they united more or less with the prosecution that what was free speech that we were utilizing changed from being speech. There's no longer speech because when we ran a campaign for political office in St. Petersburg, Florida in 2017 and 2019. We were doing it under the leadership. The Russians had paid us to do this. And when we did reparations tour throughout 6 cities in the United States, that was associated with the United Nations traveling throughout the states, investigating conditions of African people, that the Russians had hired us to do that. And when I went to Moscow to attend a conference of nations who that was there dealing with the question of self-determination, it was the Russians who had made us do this. So they came up with this ridiculous thing and saying that it was no longer speech, but it was actions. The actions were I traveled someplace to speak. I got people to sign petitions calling for United Nations Convention, United Nations investigation of the United States violation of the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, and had somebody run for office. And all of these things are clearly just a speech, but they said it's no longer speech now because we were working for the Russians, which is absolutely insane, because there's nothing that they charge us with doing that we haven't been doing for 50 years. And they said our position on Ukrainian war, that it was something that was initiated, the war was initiated by the United States, as a part of an assault that's being made against the Russia for a number of years, more than 100 years, in fact. And so they said our position represented working for Russia. And ultimately what came out of that was if Russia or if any country has a position, and we have the same position, they can claim and declare that it's a consequence of we're working for the Russians, and it was just a ridiculous thing. It is ridiculous now, and we're fighting, and we're going to win.
I fully support that, and we got to hit a quick break, but I find it interesting the timing of us talking about this, because conservatives like Tucker Carlson literally just went to Russia and interviewed Vladimir Putin, but nobody has arrested them and claimed that they're working in concert with the Russians. Donald Trump announced and said that, he said this last night actually, that he would allow Russia to invade NATO nations if they didn't pay him to protect them. But no one has arrested him for working with the Russians. But when black people trying to find international partners to push for this need for international reparations for African Americans, you get flashbang grenades coming through your front door. They raid your accounts, they take your passport, etc. This is why it's so important for us to get this messaging out there, to understand the contradictions in the way that this nation works. I'm going to talk to you about next steps after the break. So we're going to hit a quick commercial. We'll be back after the break. Calling 447-226-1380, News and Talk 1380 WAOK.